Sunday Baroque Conversations is made possible by the Friends of Sunday Baroque and is produced at WSHU Public Radio in Fairfield, Connecticut. I'm Suzanne Bona. Thank you for listening. Don't miss an episode of Sunday Baroque Conversations. Subscribe on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us a review. If you want to find out where you can listen to our weekly show, visit our website, sundaybaroque.org, for a station list and our 24/7 stream. Again, that's sundaybaroque.org. In 1982, a group of early music fans founded the Connecticut Early Music Society to present an annual festival of concerts every June. They feature a repertory of European music written before about 1800, and they focus on historically informed performance practices, including the use of period instruments. Ian Watson is artistic director of the Connecticut Early Music Festival. He is an acclaimed keyboardist whose distinguished resume includes serving as organist at St. Margaret's Westminster Abbey and music director of the historic Christopher Wren Church, St. James's Piccadilly. Ian Watson joins me on Zoom to talk about the Connecticut Early Music Festival and his life in music. Hi, it's such a pleasure to meet you.
Hi, Suzanne. Thanks for having me.
So you had quite a life in music from the time you were just a teenager. You won a scholarship to the Junior School of the Royal Academy of Music when you were just 14. How and when did you get your start playing organ?
Well, let's see. First, it's very, very nice to be here chatting with you, and I'm really looking forward to chatting about the Connecticut Early Music Festival. So my early life consisted of really not very much music at all. I didn't start learning the piano. Well, actually, that's not quite true. I had piano lessons for about a year when I was 7 years old, and then gave up basically and carried on my own.
Mhm.
And then started having lessons again when I was about 13. And at the same time began organ lessons with my piano teacher's son, who was a guy called Richard Hickox, who was actually ended up as a pretty famous conductor. And I progressed very quickly and got a scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music Junior Department when I was 14 years old. Yeah, after about a year of study of that. So that the Royal Academy of Music Junior School at that point was for so-called specially gifted children, or whatever that entails. And so I went there for 3 years, I think, and then went a couple of years later to the Royal Academy of Music proper as a full-time senior student.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of fell into it. I met Richard Hickox and his mum simply because I joined the local church choir, and Richard's dad was the vicar,
Mm-hmm.
and I started singing in the choir there. And that was kind of how that happened. It was all very lucky.
Huh.
Yeah.
So you have really established yourself as an early music scholar, which is a very particular field of music or subgenre, if you will. How did you find your way into early music?
Into early music, well,
Mm-hmm.
it was really a very, very gradual process, I would say. Um, I played the organ,
Mm-hmm.
and the organ is an integral element of early music. But I was really playing, big organ works rather than continuo, the smaller stuff. And then occasionally people would say, "Oh, we need someone to play in a Messiah or whatever." This was as a teenager. And I started playing for local choirs as an accompanist, this sort of thing. And it just kind of went from there. Um, I sort of did all sorts of things, played in West End shows and many, many different things, cabaret stuff,
Mm-hmm.
before, as it were, focusing on early music, which really happened purely by accident. I was just, enjoying playing as much music as I possibly could, and just really happened to start mixing with people who were also interested in early music. And so I got into it. I felt I had some sort of, it resonated with me. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say I had affinity, but it resonated with me. And I just carried on doing it. And then I started mixing with other people who were better at it, and so it went on. I didn't really study it at all.
Huh.
It's really just doing it with really good people for a long time.
Hmm.
Um, that's really how it happened.
Huh.
Um, it's interesting. I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. Often with the Hand and Hide Society, um, we have uh, master classes, etc., where the students are encouraged to ask us questions at the end, and they always say, "How did you get into early music?" That's the question. How did you get into music? And a lot of the other players will say, "Well, I had this kind of road to Damascus experience. This happened, and it was so wonderful. And I had to." As far as I was concerned, I just really fell into it, and people started patting me on the head because I was good at it, and I enjoyed that. And then later on, people started paying me money to do it. I thought, well, this is okay. This beats working for a living, and honestly, that's kind of how it's carried on.
Huh.
So, being absolutely candid. So that's really where I'm at now. But had a lot of experience of doing a lot of early music with some really, really people that knew what they were doing. And I,
Sure.
I think some of it's rubbed off.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And so now you are, among other things, you are the artistic director of the Connecticut Early Music Festival. And
Correct.
the festival's goal is to promote the knowledge and appreciation of early music performed in historically appropriate style. So, as the artistic director, that's a pretty big goal. How do you approach that goal? How do you organize a season? How do you schedule the programs and the musicians? What's that process?
Well, I think really what that means, historically appropriate style, that really the imperative there is to use instruments of the period, which is what we do. So, um, I'm not saying that it's wrong or anything else for anybody to play early music on any instrument you want. But our preference, and certainly my preference, is to play instruments which the composer would have been familiar with, and for which, of course, they wrote the music in the first place.
Hmm.
So then that sort of gives the impression that it's kind of polishing up relics in a museum. That we're going to use these old instruments, which didn't have the, as it were, benefit of the improvements in quotes that were made in later centuries. I mean, a lot of these instruments are very, very hard to play. The strings instruments tend to go out of tune as you're playing them. They're very, very susceptible with gut strings, etc., to temperature and especially humidity. And so the players have to be very, very expert to play in tune on instruments which are going out of tune. And then the brass instruments and woodwind instruments are very, very different to the ones that we know now. So why do we play these instruments or use these instruments, which are very difficult and in many cases unreliable to play because they haven't, as I say, had the benefit of the improvements that are made in, for example, the 19th century. But we do that in order to get closer to the historically appropriate style.
Hmm.
All of the players have a lot of detailed knowledge about playing techniques. That's the first thing, and about the instruments and the setup of the instruments. So the point is not to polish up relics in a museum. The point is to try to recreate that uh, kind of white hot moment of performance and creation of the music, which in many cases has been dimmed or dulled
Hmm.
over the years. I remember very clearly one of the first times I ever played in a period instrument orchestra. I was probably early in my early 20s. I sat in an orchestra with the Hanover Band
Oh.
playing a Haydn symphony. I was playing the harpsichord in a Haydn symphony. And often in Haydn and that period of music, the second violins and violas would do this kind of 16th note scrubbing, you know, and you can see a lot of people just sitting there looking kind of bored. But you know what? It was so incredibly exciting on the instruments that he wrote it for,
Hmm.
because the bow, the shape of the bow and the strings you're able to get a really kind of gritty articulation to those, which are not possible on a modern instrument.
Hmm.
And I just found it so exciting. The hair was standing up on the back of my neck, and I thought, this is great. This is the way to do it. This is the only way to do it, really,
Mhm.
for me.
Mhm.
So that was another, that those sort of experiences were ones which I found sort of inspirational. Later on in life, for example, I took part in the Bach Cantata Pilgrimage. This is in the year 2000. It's a
Oh,
long time ago now, with
wow.
John Eliot Gardner, and played loads and loads of cantatas in places where Bach lived and worked, which of course was amazing in itself, but also to play them on the instruments that Bach knew and recognized. That was really, I came back from that. I think, I just don't want to, I don't want to do this any other way.
Mhm.
This is for me, I'm
Mhm.
saying for everybody, certainly for me, this is the way to perform this music. So
Mhm.
when I took over at Connecticut, they'd already had period instruments in full swing there for some time. I thought this is great. So um, I planned the season with as much variety as possible,
Hmm.
but always with this idea and booking artists and booking musicians that I know who have a similar view to me of making this music come alive, which is very, very important to me.
Mhm.
So, does that answer the question? I
Sure.
can't even remember what your question was, Suzanne, to be honest with you.
Well,
I'm just talking.
it was wonderful information. It was a great answer. And I think too that um, people don't necessarily understand the difference. They don't necessarily understand what it means to be historically informed or whatever. So you
No.
gave a really wonderful illustration of, really the sort of the hands-on.
Okay.
When you're organizing the any season for the festival, this one or anyone, or maybe a future one even,
Yeah.
what kind of do you look for a unifying theme or a hook, or how would you approach that? How would you decide? I mean, I realize that there's probably a lot. What we see is the tip of the iceberg, and so I'm sort of trying to pull back a little bit to what goes through your head. Do you think of ways to group together? You talked about variety, so I assume that maybe that is one of the goals you have. But what other kinds of things go through your head as you're trying to sort through and come up with a season?
Well, actually, I don't. I don't think thematically at
Okay.
all. I think our festival is really 3 weekends.
Mm-hmm.
This is how what it is. It's 3 weekends of two concerts.
Mm-hmm.
So, in order to establish some sort of theme
Mm-hmm.
over 3 weeks with two concerts a week, I'm not sure that really makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
So I tend to think in pairs of concerts, which are contrasted.
Okay.
That's how I view it.
Okay.
I want to say one other thing actually about period instruments. And in fact, I did this. I remember that I did a kind of a lecture, whatever that is, a lecture to some people about what is early music for the Connecticut Early Music Festival. And, you know, it, things which I or we take for granted, you know, there are some people that think that early music has got something to do with, 5, 6-year-old children, right? Which, understandably, why would they not think that, that other people think that early music is, Renaissance music, and that
Right.
once you get into Mozart, oh no, but my feeling is that we've done a number of Beethoven symphonies, for example, in the Connecticut Early
Oh,
Music Festival, and
interesting.
I'd like to go later as well.
Okay.
But I think honestly think it's the period instrument and the approach which is the most important thing. I think that's really, to me, that's what defines early music.
Mm-hmm.
It's a philosophy of trying to make the music new in the way that or make the new music the way that it was, understood at the time by the composer.
Hmm.
I think it's interesting, for example, that the Brahms double concerto for violin and cello, the first performance of that, the cellist did not use an end pin.
Mm.
They sat in with the cello between their knees like a
Wow.
Baroque cellist,
Right.
right? Pretty
Huh.
interesting, I think. That
Brahms.
sort of thing. People
Wow.
don't think about that. They think of Brahms as being a much more modern, but actually was actually kind of a backward-looking composer. He made editions of Couperin's keyboard music, for example.
Hmm.
You know, but so I think it's much less about a period of music than an approach to music. That's how I
Okay.
would view it.
Okay. So let's talk about this season, the 2024 season for the
Yeah.
Connecticut Early Music Festival. What do you have, and how are those pairs of concerts? What's the unifying thing about them, or what are the highlights of each of the weekends?
Well, the very first concert is a concert of all Bach.
Hmm.
And um, the very first concert in 1982 that the Connecticut Early Music Festival ever presented was a concert of all Bach. And this time we're doing a suite number two. We have harpsichord concerto in A. We have Brandenburg's 4 and 5. I wanted to do Brandenburg 3, but the venue isn't big enough, unfortunately. It would have been 3, 4, and 5. It's just 4 and 5, which is good. And we're playing all on single strings, which is the way that it would have been done.
Hmm.
And we have well, probably the best Baroque flute player in the country now, Emmy Ferguson.
Hmm.
She's going to be joining us for that. She is absolutely fantastic.
Hmm.
The second concert we've had to change, unfortunately, because of illness. It was going to be Kleine Kammermusik, which was two oboes, bassoon, cello, and harpsichord. But unfortunately, that's had to be changed. But we have another equally interesting program with violin, harpsichord, and cello called um, Foreign Ground, Common Soil. I think that's
Hmm.
right. Common Soil, Foreign Ground. No, I forget now. Wait a second. Let me get this right.
Okay.
Foreign Soil, Common Ground.
Okay.
Foreign Soil, Common Ground. And that was devised by a friend of mine, Guy Fishman, who's appeared many times.
Hmm.
The festival was also the principal cello at the Handel and Hyde Society in Boston.
Hmm.
So that's the first weekend. And
Okay.
then the next weekend, I'm going back to my roots, playing organ music. And I'm going to give a recital of some big Baroque organ music pieces, the
Hmm.
Passacaglia Fugue in C minor by Bach, plus some other stuff, Purcell and Buxtehude, etc. But also, there's a bunch of string players going to be there too, and we're going to do some works with organ and strings.
Hmm.
The Mozart's epistle sonatas or church sonatas he wrote uh, really to be played during the epistle procession during the service. And the cathedral in Salzburg was so large that you could actually have a kind of 2 minute piece of music to
Wow.
accompany that procession. So they're really beautiful pieces. I actually recorded them quite a few years ago with the King's Consort in London. So we're doing some of those, and also a really charming organ concerto by a gentleman called James Hook. Nothing to do with Peter Pan, but he was an 18th century English organist and composer. So
Hmm.
that'd be a lot of fun. So there's plenty of variety in that program. If you like organ music, if you like organ and strings music, great. That's concert for you right there. And then I think the following week, let me think, Seven Times Salt is the next concert.
Hmm.
And they're presenting a program called A Brave Barrel of Oysters, which are basically songs, readings, bawdy songs and poetry and raucous stuff from Samuel Pepys's London, which is really a lot of fun. They actually came last year too and was so successful.
Fun.
Everyone enjoyed it so much. We got them again, which is really, really great. Um, The next one is a group called the Lute Song Trio, which is kind of a branch of the Baltimore Consort, I think they're called, which is really a top group. Ron McFarlane is one of the
Right.
best lutenists in the country, and there's a gamba player and a singer. And the final concert is the good old Vivaldi Gloria,
Oh.
but with the voices of Concora, Connecticut's professional choir.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be playing the Vivaldi. It's all Vivaldi and, well, not quite all Vivaldi. We're playing Vivaldi two cello concerto,
Mm-hmm.
Vivaldi concerto for four violins, Vivaldi Sinfonia, and we're playing some music by some female Italian composers of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara Strozzi, Francesca Caccini, and Isabella Leonarda.
Mm.
Which aren't household names, but hope they will be one
Mm.
day.
Yeah.
So that's our final program.
Sounds wonderful. And who will be performing those pieces? Which group?
We have what we call the Connecticut or Early Music Festival Ensemble.
Oh.
And the first concert is played by the ensemble, as is the last concert.
Mm-hmm.
And they're basically people, my colleagues from the Handel and Haydn Society in Boston and other places, who are just really, really superb. I mean, really fantastic players.
Mm-hmm.
So I booked them because they make me look good, which is really what it's all about. So no, I do. They're wonderful players, and so they know how to perform too. So yeah.
That's great. So the Connecticut Early Music Festival 2024 is taking place in June. Do you want to give the
Yes.
dates?
Yes, June the 1st and 2nd, the 8th and 9th, and the 15th and 16th
Fantastic. We will
of
put a
June.
link as well to the festival website. And this is an annual festival. So if you're
Yes.
not able to catch it this year, then you'll have another chance next time around with some
Yeah.
other top early music performers and scholars. I have been speaking on Zoom with Ian Watson, keyboardist, early music scholar, and artistic director of the Connecticut Early Music Festival. Thank you so much. What a pleasure and honor to speak with you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. Same here.
Thank you.
Thank you.